This month on the Mainly Human Design podcast, Apple brings Genmojis to an AI war while quietly killing apps with AI. Liquid Glass melts the brains of sycophants and haters alike, and XR sneaks into everything while still being ignored. My name is Daniel, and I'm a designer of 13 years, and this is...
I'm Pip, designer of 5, 6.
Fucking Pip. We run the Mainly Human Design Discord server, which helps meta-modernist designers connect, learn, and collaborate, so you should join. So let's start off by talking about one of the most recent events around this podcast, I suppose, and that is WWDC. So what did you think of WWDC this year?
It was interesting. A little bit quiet. I felt like a lot of it was aesthetics over function, which is fine. The AI approach was very, very different to last year, right? Where last year, like Siri was the saving grace for everything, and this year it was very much like subdued, and AI was more like deeply integrated into OS rather than one agent to save them all. What about you?
The elephant in the room is that their AI products suck. Siri's terrible, and they needed to get through it without acknowledging it's probably going to take them 2 years to catch up to everyone else. You know, I think the one thing that does bum me out about a lot of these events is that they are so hyper produced and sterile that it doesn't feel like old school Apple events anymore. And we'll talk about Liquid Glass and the chaos around Liquid Glass, but they are showing their hands a little bit about how they're trying to intertwine interactions to content and starting to blur the lines between an operating system and an application. So I think like that stuff is really interesting.
That overproduced feeling of it was definitely present. I'm a bit sick of like everything feeling like a trailer rather than just people talking to me. But I agree. They definitely showed their hand a bit. Liquid Glass will be a fun conversation when we get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Apple at this juncture as a company feels like a boomer company. They reinvented the wheel to a certain extent, 20 years ago, and they haven't evolved since. And I don't know if they can really pivot from a brand perspective. But yeah, I think that after COVID, they said, wow, this looks really good and professional and clean. Let's have a transition. Let's have people drive race cars, jump out of planes, all that crap. But I just think in general, their product doesn't feel like a modern product anymore. It feels like all their products don't feel like a modern product anymore. They feel like they're kind of behind the times, but that's just personally me. And I know that a lot of people get pissed off because people are fanboys of Apple. So with all of that said, let's move on to the elephant in the room. Liquid Glass and the design presented at both Google I/O and WWDC. So, okay, surface level. People have been talking broadly about glass and how Apple leans into liquid glass. How do you feel about the discourse right now?
I'm enjoying the nickname Liquid Ass. That's fun. But in general, it's fine. I mean, it's a design choice, right? I don't hate it. I think it's very pretty in some aspects. There's obviously some insane accessibility issues that come with like the default settings they've currently shipped. I don't really understand the full purpose of it. Like, if you look back at when they shifted from skeuomorphic to flat, there was a purpose to it, right? Of like bringing more function as well as form. Whereas with this, it feels like they're priming us for a form factor that doesn't exist yet. And I wonder whether they've kind of come a little bit too early with it or not. What do you think?
I think Apple as a design company, especially from a UI design company and UX, is still probably the best. Everything they do is very intentional and thought through. And you don't have a company that big with that reputation, with that kind of design culture that doesn't think through these things holistically. And while their documentation doesn't say a lot and you have to read between the lines, the foundation that Apple is trying to lay down is very smart. And fundamentally, they understand that computing will dramatically change in the next 5 years due to AI and XR. And due to the emergent medium of spatial computing, how users interact with data will require UI to be dynamically sewn in holistically to both the world and content people consume. And while I do think Google's focus on customization and personalization makes more practical sense with Material U and Material 3, I think Apple's focus on trying to blend UI and content together is both very exciting and potentially very telling about how they view the future of computing and how to slowly get users used to a new form of spatial computers. And I think that is telling about what's coming down the road for XR. And I think it's really exciting. Um, However, the problem with Apple is that they have a hard time weighing utility over aesthetic, and they struggle really hard in that aspect. And I think that over time, utility eventually floats to the surface, but they always go aesthetic first. And I think that as a medium, especially if they're trying to blend these two, which is really the beginning of spatial computing, and then we can talk about why 3D is important for that. Um, the problem is that the medium itself, as like a flat panel design, it has its barriers and has its limitations, and they have hit those limitations. Unless if they built the complete operating system from the ground up to be this fluid structure. At the end of the day, they're taking aesthetic shaders and they're kind of like shoehorning them into a pre-existing system, and it's kind of showing itself a bit. Now, the people complaining about liquid glass or skeuomorphism is interesting. I think we've seen the rise of skeuomorphism come out across the entire industry, and skeuomorphism usually comes about when there is a paradigm shift in computing or interacting with computing, which I think everyone knows by this point, knows what I'm talking about. It's like XR to a certain extent, and AI. And I think that the thing that kind of bums me out is that it's not necessarily, it's really awesome when you can achieve it. And I think Google and Apple have achieved it, but from the mass consumer perspective, people are so focused on surface level design aesthetic that they don't understand the full nature of like what they're excited about. So like we can see this with Airbnb's icons, which I think look absolutely terrible. And you see this with Apple, you see this with everyone. And it's, if I pull up a drawer from iOS like 2 with like back in the day in 2011, and you have like the wood shelf or the bubbles with like reflections and stuff like that. We are in this secular cycle of recycling design and acting like it's the newest, greatest thing. And at the end of the day, it serves a purpose, but people are just far too obsessed with aesthetic. And at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter. Its purpose is to try to transition people. And soon, like in maybe 5-6 years, we'll go back to flat and everyone will be like, this is like the greatest thing ever. Or at that point, will move on past this flat structure and we will get out of the secular nature of basically what we've been designing for the past 20 years and going to something new, which is what I hope.
To your point about, well, Airbnb's design sucking and cycles coming around,
Johnny
I think
Ives
this
did
is
it.
different.
Johnny Ives did it.
Johnny Ives
I'm
did
not
it.
sure if Johnny Ives is there pixel pushing in, Maya. Johnny Ives did it. It's fucking stupid.
I think I like it. I like this new wave of design. It's interesting because there's, instead of one like consistent feeling, as has been like previous mobile OSs with Android and iOS kind of being derivatives of each other, it feels like a lot of different companies are coming in it from different places. So Airbnb feels a lot flatter than say like Liquid Glass. Even with their 3D icons, they're still retaining a lot of that flatness. Google is like still quite flat, it's just more expressive, and then Apple has gone like full 3D, which is interesting to me. I like that. Oh, there's my cat. For me, I think the important part about the form is the emotion it brings, and I think that you can see this with a lot of different apps in the early part of this decade, where we've gone further and further away from like emotion into really like simple brutalist aesthetic, and pure like minimalism gets you far, but eventually I feel like we've swung too far and now we're trying to get back to that like joy that some design can bring. But I agree that like there is a danger of going too skeuomorphic.
I think that emotion and joy, it's so funny because I think that when designers talk like that, which I don't necessarily disagree. I understand what they're saying, I think, but personally, I often equate emotion and joy from a pop sense to aesthetics and motion versus, say, emotion being tied to how a product works, feels, and how it allows users to fulfill a somewhat deterministic desire. And due to aesthetics being so easily consumable, people often equate motion to a somewhat superficial deliverable, if that makes sense. And I think that we're kind of running into that with liquid glass, and I think that there will be a course correction
Oh,
to
for
try
sure.
to solve that. But fundamentally, I think what people are trying to solve with this 3D stuff is they're trying, like, from a deep level, you're trying to lead people away. How do I explain this? If you're a designer, like creating these patterns, especially at the Apple and Google level, you see 5 to 10 years down the road and you're trying to lead people away. And then you have the rest of the industry or a lot of other creators or business people just seeing the icing of the cake, and that's all they saw. Now, we saw this with the like international type movement when Airbnb brought out the redesign in like 2013, 2014 with the testicles, and everyone just started like copying them. And so everyone saw hand drawn illustrative icons or illustrations and huge type everywhere. And then when that was happening, I'm like, 95% of people using this style are emulating the surface level, but not the intentionality or the composition of these tools. And this is just going to make it a clusterfuck. But with that said, real quick, what I do find interesting is something that you and I have been talking about for a very long time, which is how 3D is becoming an essential tool in products in general. Apple is using it from a surface level like OS perspective, but like Airbnb, all of these other tools are basically like 3D is everywhere. And so the question is that how essential is learning 3D now for a designer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's interesting to see 3D becoming more commonplace, and I do think that's an influence of XR. Even if XR hasn't exploded in the same way that AI has, I think the new kind of design realm of it is influencing 2D design in that way, where you're seeing more physical 3D user interfaces. I think I still think learning 3D is useful and important for designers. I don't know if it's yet essential unless you're going into XR. It'll probably be essential once XR gets on a bit more. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's interesting. I think it brings more joy and excitement to a design and opens up your possibility space a bit more. This is coming from someone who loves 3D and can't use Blender to save their life.
No, I mean, I was looking at like Apple Maps. I was looking at Google Maps. I was, of course, those are topological tools that show depth. But
Mhm.
when you start seeing 3D move its way across the web, it's becoming more commonplace. And you see a
Yeah.
lot of tools trying to make 3D easy, but it's not. And I think that do designers need to learn 3D? Probably not. I mean, a lot of designers don't. It's not going to make them that valuable if they don't. And the barrier to entry, like, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to, if you're going to, like, if we take an icon from Airbnb, right?
Mhm.
Those 3D icons are essentially, I'm assuming they're PNG or GIF sequences, but they were probably rendered out in tools that are specifically made for 3D. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you can really, if you want to actually use 3D objects inside of operating systems and stuff like that, they will be kind of massive. So there is a bunch of hacks in how people are trying to produce 3D for these ecosystems. But to Apple's point, what they're showing is that they have the hardware now to actually render these things efficiently. It's just a matter about the thing that excites me about how 3D is being wrapped up into everything is that we're going to be starting to see new standards. We're going to start seeing better practices. We're going to see new technology that will make 3D more accessible from an engineering perspective. Right now we have FBX, GLTF, USDZ, all of these different formats that will eventually become more and more compact and more robust. And with that, we're going to start seeing like 3D actually holistically evolving into products. And if you're a designer, I would learn relevant 3D products, learn Blender, learn Maya, learn ZBrush, learn whatever these are. Stay away from, spline, stay away from anything that is really hacky, because the problem is that you need to produce products that can be utilized in any situation. And that means you have to learn topology, you have to learn materials, you have to learn how to unwrap, you have to learn how to texture, if you want to get into that space. Or you can maybe just rely on AI to basically do that for you. Now, I think that brings me into the next segment. Woo, AI, baby.
Nice.
Okay, so real quick on the Apple front, I personally believe that their redesign of liquid glass and why it's had such a major impact on the news, especially design news lately, is because Apple was relying on Apple Glass and the redesign and the renaming of all of their operating systems as a band-aid for their lack of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And I don't know if
100%.
it worked.
Yeah, I don't think it did. I think a lot of people were hoping that they'd address the elephant in the room that is like Ultra Siri, what Apple Intelligence, whatever you want to call it, from last year that they were going to ship, and then realized that it just wasn't good enough. I think what's really interesting to me is as they've tried to like make you look the other way with liquid glass, they have been shipping some interesting stuff, right? And they've shipped the sort of stuff that excites me the most with AI, where it's practical like use cases rather than just giving you the entire world to explore. So they're doing stuff like live translation, which Google showed off as well, which is like fascinating because it's not only is it like a practical use case of AI, it's also bringing things that you'd assume would be glasses native into our existing lives already. They're doing stuff like classic Google Lens stuff, where you can like screenshot something and then analyze it with AI to search for it. All that sort of thing that's like built into the OS as like standard utility defaults is great, and it's really nice to see AI empowering that and enabling that. I just think that like the agentic future where you talk to an agent and it does stuff for you is so far away, and they were so foolish to try and announce it last year or before they were confident in it.
So basically, this is how I see Apple handling their AI, and we can talk about Google does it. Basically, Apple realizes they can't do. The only thing they can produce is somewhat deterministic outputs of data.
Yep.
So I can ask it what time is something, or I can speak to it and I want it to translate, right? And they had, but they can't do anything indeterministic. So basically, what their whole goal of this is like they had to talk about AI, and so they try to sprinkle it through the whole thing, but they were trying to focus predominantly on deterministic AI. And when you talk about Siri, I asked Siri all this stuff, that is indeterministic output, and they couldn't do it. And so they're like, okay, how do we check the indeterminist box? They're like, let's take Genmojis and let's just like show how we can merge Genmojis. And everyone's like, this is fucking stupid. And I don't understand why Apple fucking keeps leaning into that. Like they basically like, isn't this the greatest thing ever? Let's put it on billboards. Let's actually billboard this fucker so we can show how you can have Genmojis of your friend wearing a little straw hat. And it's like, okay, that's cool. I mean, if I was going to give what?
That's Apple Intelligence for you.
Well, they're very clever strategically about how they expose their hand and what they can't do. They never say they can't do anything. And if they do, it's a big deal, which they kind of did 3 or 4 months ago. But if I was going to give like the highlights of like what they've did really, really well, instead of just shitting on them the whole time, I would say they are slowly opening up their SDK for their large language models. And that is being done on like the local level, and local AI is a big deal. And Apple has been investing into having local AI on device or like a neural processing units, NPUs, on their device for about 5 or 6 years to a certain extent where no one else can get NPUs. And so Apple has been using AI for a very long time, and they are building it into the system. So that is a major strength that they have versus others. I'm not sure if Gemini can run everything locally. Meta has using like Llama to run things locally. And so that to me is really cool. And then one thing that I did get really excited about is their form of visual intelligence. And granted, like Google's already doing this with Google Lens and stuff like this. But what Apple showed that no one's really talking about is that with visual intelligence, they are starting to reimagine and rework the app ecosystem. So there was a really quick shot and like explanation in the video where someone took a picture of a coat and they said, I like this coat. And it showed you in the top, it opened up in the operating system, a picture of the coat, and it showed you different places to buy it, like Etsy, wherever. And instead of opening that application, you hit Etsy and you can buy the coat on Etsy, but it wasn't going through the Etsy app. And what that was showing is that Apple is starting to move away from the app to app model. And that's going to scare the shit out of everyone. Like Google's already been doing that, but Google can't really make a decent product to save their life. Like they have really great ideas. They just can never stick the landing. I don't think that is a controversial statement. I think that's kind of a well-known thing at this point. Apple knows how to sell, and they know how to get devices into consumers who spend. And Apple taking over that ecosystem, especially with the recent antitrust lawsuits, is signaling to the market that apps are going to be meaningless. Now, imagine if you do that with coffee or food. Like pretty soon it's going to say, Uber Eats, DoorDash, blah, blah, blah. But soon, because no one gives a shit if you buy it off of Uber Eats or any of these other places, you just want a fucking piece of pizza. So pretty soon that's just going to be like the service is going to be irrelevant. And that's to me was probably the most interesting thing. Mixed with liquid glass, Apple is like the biggest thing to come out of this WWDC that no one's talking about is their integration of how they're pushing forward with probably their glasses and XR in the future, and their like reimagining of their operating system and their monetization system. I think that is the biggest thing that no one's talking about.
So I want to challenge you on something there in terms of the death of app to app. I think it's coming, and I think it will appear in certain cases. But how do you think discovery will happen? Because the one thing I can't work out is, say, like, I want to browse for a new pair of trousers. I don't think that AI, like, I can't see a future where I will ask an AI, hey, I want to buy a new set of trousers, and it will just give me a bunch of images. I feel like UI there and specialized UI for my use case is still like the way that we will interact with these products. But am I being naive there? Am I too stuck in the past?
I think that's a valid question. I think a lot of people are going to be making that argument. Let's just visit this a second, right?
Okay.
So 20 years ago, if you wanted to buy a pair of trousers, or what we call them in America, pants, you son of a bitch.
Oh.
What you would have to do is you would have to see an ad, or you would go to a store. Now, this store is a place that you may have discovered while you were walking. You saw an ad in the paper, or I'm not sure what the hell they call it in your land.
The old timey-wimey.
The old, yes, exactly.
Sorry.
So you walk in there, you get the pants, you love the pants, you build up this brand relationship with the fucking store, right?
Yeah.
If you would have told people 20, 30 years ago, yeah, no one goes to stores anymore, everyone just buys them online. Everyone's like, well, they don't try them on. How can you, like, how do you get pants or trousers if you can't try them on? And then the business model turned into something completely different. And so then it was like, I saw a banner ad, right? Mm-hmm. Or I saw someone say, I bought these pants on this, and then you go to that website and you buy it, right? Mm-hmm. Then it went even further. So then you're starting to see trousers or pants in Instagram ads, and then you're like, I'm gonna buy pants off of Instagram. And then now you're starting to see, I saw pants in a video. I clicked on the pants because I thought they looked good. And now I'm buying the pants from a video I was watching that wasn't a commercial, even though it was kind of a commercial, right? So, like, do you give a fuck if you go buy those pants at Banana Republic, or if you buy it? It doesn't matter, right? Like, you're still going to have brand like recognition when it comes down to quality, when it comes down to all these other things. And so brand recognition will be important. But like, what storefront you buy them at is irrelevant. So it's like, I want a pair of pants. You could download a service that is just, predominantly Banana Republic, and you could pull that up every time you buy pants. But if you're buying pants consistently, the operating system will know that you like Banana Republic, and whoever serves those pants up to you will basically do that. Like, the discovery mechanism. Go on.
So I mean, maybe a good metaphor for where we're at the moment is Amazon versus like a specialized shop, like, I don't know, ASOS or Passenger or whatever. So I wouldn't buy clothes on Amazon, because even though they're still even if it's a trusted brand, my like trust in Amazon to deliver me a quality piece of clothing is like at 5%. I just like find every single piece of clothing on there untrustworthy and sketchy. Whereas like if I go into a trusted brand or shop and find a nice pair of pants, feels weird to call them that, there I have like that level of trust, and I have that like that interest of discoverability of a trusted brand where I can browse their other products. I wonder whether like I wonder what form that will take in an agentic future.
I don't think that everything is going to be like, the operating system isn't going to do all of the selling. If you're watching a video, if you're looking at an article, if you're doing all this stuff, all of this stuff will be billboards for pants or trousers, right? Like, all of these things will be touch points. And so then Google, Apple, all their job is to figure out how to be the checkout counter of that. Now, there's gonna be, you can probably bypass it. There's gonna be antitrust stuff around bypassing that, right? Like, I want to go, like, because these companies are gonna want you to purchase their stuff through their checkout process. But that checkout process is gonna be a lot easier through the Google operating system or the Apple operating system than a third-party checkout. Or there probably will be third-party APIs that people will use that will hack or help bypass that ecosystem. And if you're like, I want to basically only care about, like, you could have a service specifically about literally anything that's about clothes that you want, and Apple will curate that for you. Or those services, or there will be a master service someone creates that is just about clothes curation, and then Apple will call that and it will be good. And you don't necessarily care that much about that. You may like, I may have, trouser, like I may use the trouser service to get pants. I don't know, maybe we get that niche where there is a service specifically about pants. It could, right? But it doesn't, you don't give a shit about the pants service. It just matters what the pants service represents. Like, it's holistically getting to that point. Like, me going to a website is irrelevant. Like, it's like this, it's like me going to the store to buy pants is gone. I do it sometimes. It's nice. I actually think it's probably will be better to go to a store than have an application in the future. So it's like, there's a store over here I go to, and I walk in there and I like that physicality. Otherwise, I just want to get what I want when I want it, and I don't give a shit who gives it to me.
I think this leads us nicely onto some of the interesting stuff that Google was doing.
Nice segue, yeah.
Thank you. Mainly Human Design, where we talk about AI, XR, and pants. Anyway, Google were really interesting in terms of they're beginning to productize more and more producing UI as an answer to your questions when you're talking to AI, especially when talking to Gemini with Canvas or something. More often than not, it will suggest that it will like build a web page for you, and you'll be able to scroll through that web page and like dynamically interact with your results. I think that's fascinating. I know that's something you're really interested in, is like this dynamic UI where nothing is ever a static site anymore and everything is built on the fly, custom tailored to your needs. At the moment, it's all obviously like super unbranded and super basic, but it's interesting to see that we're slowly getting to that future where I ask a question and instead of just getting text, I get like a fully themed web page as a result.
I think that Google inherently wants you to believe everything will be a web page because that's in the best interest of their product.
Mhm.
Now, there is a theory that we're moving from the web page esque system, which is even in the app ecosystem we have right now, are essentially apps are just the majority of these applications are just web wrappers. What it's like, the future of the web probably will be a collection of services or applications that are built with APIs and SDKs that are served from like that are served live from one agent to another. And I think that's where we're going. If it comes into the form of a web page, I think the way we understand web pages today is going to be completely different in 10 years. It's going to be, it's going to not like today's form of web pages will be in antiquity in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And 20 years may seem like a long time, but I'm getting old and I'm like, I've seen this stuff evolve in a glacial like movement to a certain extent, but relatively fast for the medium. And I think that applications in the web, the way that they have been built, were the reason why they were built that way is because of our technical limitations and frameworks and foundations that we had at the time. We have a lot of processing power now. We have, for the most part, decent data frameworks that can deliver gigs over on any phone that you want a second, which is crazy, right? We have these frameworks that are in these foundations that are basically really advanced that can take advantage of these things, and whoever can take advantage of these things as fast as they like, whoever wins this race is going to be making a lot of money. And you can get theoretical about like, well, in theory you can do this, but what's it in practice? It just really comes down to social adoption, technological adoption, economics, and I think at this juncture everyone is betting on AI to do all these things, but AI at the end of the day is a technology and a tool, and how people utilize that tool takes time, even though it could be technically like possible. And this is where I see the future of like Google. Again, I don't think they're going to stick the landing, but they're in a very good position. But this is in a place where some like a new player like OpenAI can come in and reinvent the wheel like Apple did. And I think that Apple can't do it. I don't think Apple can do it. They are too large. They are too bureaucratic. Having friends who work at Apple or who have worked at Apple, they are basically saying the middle managed bureaucracy, like the top leadership has a great vision, the workers have a great vision, everything in between, all the middle management and bureaucracy and political games makes it impossible to do anything. And in the age of hyper growth and acceleration, like that's a death sentence. And so I think in the next couple years, you're going to see Apple starting to gut a lot of its, like a lot of their staff. And they haven't done it yet. They've been very loyal and like for the most part, and like very disciplined to trying to keep Apple the way it's been. But they economically and structurally, they just can't do it anymore. But their hand has to be pushed. And I think you're going to start seeing a lot of people being pushed out, and they're going to say it's because of AI, but it's not the way that people think it is. I think that there's a lot of people who believe AI is going to come over and take people's jobs because AI will do those jobs. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that AI is such a powerful technology that in order for you to build faster, you can't have all of that gunk and all of that bureaucracy keeping you down, especially if you're a legacy product with a lot of design and engineering debt that you have to rework. And I think that they're probably working on that internally, and I think they know this. They're trying to push it out as long as possible. But as soon as you have OpenAI and another third party come in and start redefining the wheel, they're gonna have to figure something out. But redefining the wheel, let's finish up this segment about talking about XR, because that's where we started as a server, and that's where probably both of our hearts still lie, is in XR. So let's pivot away from Apple. We'll come back to them a little bit. Let's talk about Google and how they are focusing and realigning their entire strategy. I don't not say entire strategy, but a lot of their design strategy around spatial computing. And I think you can make the argument after looking at Glass that Apple's doing the same. So what are your thoughts?
I thought their glasses demo was really interesting. Like as opposed to like the Snap way, where Snap are like shipping really bulky glasses form factor that like has 6-off tracking and everything built into it in a way that isn't at a consumer level, and Apple are shipping the opposite, where they're going like, well, what's the most extreme headset we can build that like does everything as the North Star for the future of where we want glasses technology to get to. Google are really interesting in that they're going, well, what's the best thing we can ship now that has a screen on it? And all it was like a pair of glasses with a display in, and that display doesn't necessarily have contextual awareness of the world. It knows what's around you and can react to it, but it can't necessarily map to it. But it looked like a really compelling use case, and something that made me way more excited than, say, like Meta Ray-Bans. I'm very much obvious that Meta is working on something similar as well, and Google have just kind of pipped them to the start line there in terms of showing off what's going on. But I think that was really interesting to see such like an advanced demo by Google. And what really interests me about Google is that they are so bullish on doing live demos as well. So obviously they had some issues with like Wi-Fi connectivity and interacting with two sets of glasses, but it was really interesting to see just how far they pushed it already.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the live demos that Google was showing, I missed those. I think actually there was like a Dyson vacuum live demo with the head of Dyson, and that was a master class of a keynote. It felt raw, it felt wonderful, and it had a lot of wonder. And I think that Google I/O's like Google Glasses demo was far more compelling because they told a story with it too, where it's like she's behind stage, she's walking from behind stage, she's interacting. They did it in real time.
Yeah.
Meta couldn't do it. They're like, hey, here's a room of a bunch of famous people saying, wow, this is the future. And like, I'm going to play Pong and I can look at a smoothie bar. And like that stuff's cool. Like what Meta did is cool. But Google, they holistically told a story in a way that was really sick. Now, Google Glass, I have so many Google Glasses. I don't know what the hell they're calling them. I have so many questions. Like, how long does that sucker, live, right? Like how long, like what's the battery life on that sucker? I think I keep talking about that in a lot of these podcasts because like that's kind of important. I want to know like how many nits the brightness is on those glasses. So like if I'm in daylight, can I see what the hell's going on? But like I think Google XR is like they took their time with it and it showed off, and their documentation's really good, and they're freaking killing it. Now, Apple, how does that compare with Apple? Well, I think Google has shown their vision. Apple hasn't. Apple has goggles. Hold on. Apple has goggles, and they're like, look at, you can watch movies, and you're like, okay, right? Like in this whole presentation, they have visual intelligence for iPhone, but they couldn't put visual intelligence on the goddamn Apple Vision Pro, which is like, Why didn't they do that? It's probably because they're like, no one would use this for that because this is an entertainment device, right? Instead, they're just like, we have widgets and we have game controllers, we have better avatars or personas as they call them. And I think that's basically it. The stuff they didn't talk about was the 90 hertz hand refresh rate, which is a fucking godsend. How do they not talk about that? Like, it's because they don't want to admit that their hand tracking was terrible and that was kind of foundational to their entire product, right? Like, the widgets are cool, but it's like, okay, so you guys finally like, hey, now we have PSVR 2 controllers. I'm like, okay, so you guys, like, could you not fit this in before? Or are you just being stubborn little shits who just basically? Oh, and they didn't talk about like fixing or evolving the digital display, which is like one of the only reasons people use that device, right? There's like, well, a lot of people use Apple Vision Pro as a monitor, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they didn't talk about that. They're like, and instead, like, I don't see their vision of where this product is, like, or where it's going. There are people who work at Apple, I will not say their names, I've talked to, where they have like, there's people who have left and who have worked on the Apple Vision Pro, and everyone internally knew how much of a disaster it was going to be. And they all made jokes internally saying it is an iPad that's stuck to your face, and Apple still hasn't gotten away from that. And
yeah, I agree with that. I think it definitely suffers from being an iPad on your face, but I do think it shows some vision. I think the persistent widgets, I'm more excited about persistent widgets than a lot of other people. I think like the fact they've unlocked that as a thing where they can you can put your headset on and all your windows and widgets will be in the same spatial place that they've been before. No other consumer like headset or application is doing that, and that's like such an awesome unlock for sense of immersion and presence and like persistence that nothing else is doing at the moment.
Well,
I'm desperate for that.
Tried to do it. Meta's tried to do it.
Meta's sick stuff sucks. Every time I put on a Quest, it like shifts 5 degrees.
I mean, I understand. No, like technologically, Apple has done, like, Apple's kind of doing things in a Google fashion where they can technically do things better. Like remembering like walls, like those like integrated widgets are cool. And they're kind of between a rock and a hard place at this moment because you need to transition everyone from a flat medium to a spatial medium. You need to make things consistent. You need to make things accessible when it comes to developing these things. I understand all of that, but they're focusing predominantly on mixed reality, but what it really is VR. And they are saying you can have consistent widgets. Is it showing a vision? I mean, the vision isn't new. It isn't, it's like, oh, they can achieve a clock or a window on a wall. That's great. I think in the future, yes, your digital canvas and space space will be all connected to like your physical space will be connected to the digital space. And I think they're showing how they're doing that, but there is no story, right?
It's definitely lacking a story.
It is kind of
stuff like Snap has a story. Stuff like Spectacles and Meta's, what is it, Orion or whatever they've called their glasses, all of those have a good story, right? Whereas Vision OS just seems to be, as you said, an iPad in your face, an extension to your Mac, but there's nothing there that tells me, okay, how am I going to use this in the future? It's more a set of tools for developers to play with at the moment, which is it's fun, but they're not necessarily like pushing the medium into where it needs to be.
They show how cool and how powerful they are at technology, but they're not. I wouldn't say Apple's a tech company. They're a product and they're a brand marketing company. That's what they are. And they were so good at telling stories and selling concepts. And now they're just like, look what we can do technically. And it is really cool. And it does like push the boundaries for whatever other people will do and they are redefining these things. And the people who work on these things, like on all of these products, are geniuses. but there is no through thread of their vision. It's like, we think XR is the future too. Here's how we can technically deliver on that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Are we going to see a new headset in 2026? I think we'll see something next year. I think next WWDC, we will see something. We won't get it into 2027. And maybe I don't know, unless if they want to like actually, they think it's prime time for the mass consumer to actually, you know, adopt these tools, which I don't think Apple, like their glasses, that's what they're going to be focusing on, right? And by that time, you're going to have Google Glass probably will come out end of like next year.
Yep.
Meta stuff will probably start to come out this year, but probably not to like the Orion factor. I don't think we need the Orion factor right now. We just need a better like Meta Ray-Bans. And
we need Ray-Bans with the screen.
Well, maybe. I mean, you know, they need to rework their entire ecosystem. The problem is that Meta doesn't have an ecosystem. They have an ecosystem on a headset. They don't have an ecosystem that they're relying on this stuff. I think that maybe mid next year, you're going to see OpenAI with their own device. And that, I think, will be the most telling and more interesting story of 2026. But we can talk about what we think that will be at some other time. And we still need to talk about Johnny Ives walking through my neighborhood and strutting and then going off to that like little restaurant and jerking off Sam Altman under the table. But what? No, it's okay. Like they're in love. It's all good. Like
okay, cool. That's fine.
Sam Altman is the new Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, so any closing thoughts before we do a wrap up?
I think, seeing as we're talking about Vision OS, I always have to give Apple credit for making the only XR operating system that feels good and like has actual thought and like systemic thought put into it. You're making a face, but like compared to Horizon OS, Vision OS is like just decades ahead, at least from a usability perspective. In some ways, it has its issues, but like the metaphors and the restrictions they put in place to try and give you a cohesive experience is just so much nicer than the Horizon OS, which just hurts me every time I use it.
How Apple has approached immersion is probably the most interesting and most groundbreaking thing. Mm-hmm. They're still stuck on eye selection.
Did you see tapping? Look to scroll?
Oh yeah, now they're adding look to scroll. When I'm like, okay,
that's crazy. That's insane.
I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Like,
how am I meant to read the bottom of a web page?
Real quick, like, I don't like using my Apple Vision Pro, not because it's like ergonomically a goddamn mess, but because it's ergonomic. Like when it comes down to weight and stuff like that, selection is the worst and most painful thing. My eyes get tired, and like I'm like looking, I'm like, I don't want that to be selected, or I'm like, look, and then after like 2 minutes, and maybe I have weak little fingies, my fingers hurt, and sometimes I'm just kind of like trying to do like try to do other things that, like, if I'm just like, I'm trying to do other things to not hurt. But they didn't fix that. They're just like, no, we're fucking tripling down on this shit. And I'm just like, stop it. No one likes this. Like no one likes it. It sucks. Like it sucks. And they're so up their own ass. And do they have a cohesive like product? Yeah, it doesn't really do anything, but it's a cohesive product. Do they have developers building things for the product? No, because they are still they're trying to fuck them as much as possible, and they think they can run the game. And it's the hubris of Apple that shines through with the Vision OS. And like, I have a $4,000 maxed out Vision OS I never use. Like,
Mm.
and it's because of all of those reasons, right? Like the other day, I was like, do I buy the PSVR 2 controllers to try them out and to see how it works? I'm like, no, why would I do that? Like, why would I spend $90? Like, I would rather
That
spend
would be insane.
$90 on a Switch 2 Pro controller, even though I just bought a Switch 2 Pro controller. I won't use that. But the other one I won't use, but I'm going to buy it. So when my friends come over, they can use it. I won't buy something even for my own enjoyment and experience within their product. And I'm not sure. And Visual Widgets isn't going to sell me on this thing. It is a dev kit, but
It's totally a dev kit.
Yeah, but it's a dev kit that isn't done well. And I think
It's
that
a dev kit that developers aren't using.
it's a dev kit that developers aren't using. And I know we shit talk. It always gets me shit talking on Apple's headset, and I tried to love it, right? And I love their documentation. The people who work on that stuff are awesome. It's this whole presentation. I'm like, we have spatial widgets. They basically looked what Meta couldn't do, and they did it. And they say, look, and it's the same thing with like their glass on Vision OS. It's like, you couldn't throw glass on things because it was too intensive, but we did it. I'm like, okay, so you're just like, is this a pissing contest? I'm like, I'm still using my Quest on like a weekly basis. Why? I'm like, it's cheap. I throw my headset around. I don't even worry about fucking breaking it. I just like throw it in a bag and I just like walk to the office and I pull it out. And I don't worry about optics getting fucked. I don't worry about it falling apart. It's good. And like, to your point, yeah, some things move around. Well, it's still more pleasant than fucking having my fingers hurt or actually be able to not be able to like select anything. What?
All right. Nice
Okay,
job
we can
turning
wrap it
my positive Apple point into a rant about how bad Apple is. But yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay, God knows how much of this I'll cut. Anyway, if you guys are interested in, if you guys liked what we were talking about, let us know in the comments down below. If you guys want to join the Mainly Human Design Discord, where you can see us streaming, and communicate with other designers like ourselves or like yourself, hopefully, link down below. Until next time, take care, plus minus. Peace.